I am Tim Shirley, the senior minister of the South Shore United Church of Christ. This is a sermon for September 20th, Divine Side Economics. Microeconomics, macroeconomics, traditional, market, command, whatever that is, mixed, trickle-down theory, supply side economics, socialism, communism, and our favorite, capitalism. These are at least some of the names of the various categories of economic principles, all designed to make money for individuals, corporations, and yes, governments. We know them well, sort of, kind of, perhaps. We hear them bantered about on the nightly news by experts, talking head prognosticators who have their own personal genie bottles and crystal balls, all designed to give them and their clients the edge. As fortune tellers who predict the future, giving us their insider, hopefully legal, financial forecasts. Many players are riveted during these segments. Must-see TV, paying close attention to the ups and downs of the stock market. We can be myopically focused on its movement, a mystery in and of itself, its tendencies and projections. The danger that this fixed obsession we have becomes the idol of our attention, our rapt attention. Are we in a growth spurt or a recession? A bull or bear market? Is depression looming on the horizon? What about our 401k? And so it goes. Obviously, a reading of today's witness from the Gospels in Matthew reveals that these concerns are not unique to our contemporary ears, but were a primary obsession of those who lived these biblical adventures back in the day. Earning a living, making a living wage, feeding a family was also, not surprisingly so, a priority of the ancients. They had a currency, coinage, just like we do. What is old is new, and what is new is old. Bartering and trading is as old as any commodity needed to sustain human life. You've got what I need, I've got what you need. All we need is a price or an agreement, because we are all in this together. In today's lection from Matthew, we read one of the parables that are included in this gospel. It is good news for some. It is bad news for others. And part of the challenge is that it smacks of socialism, communism, both in their purest forms, reflections of the lifestyle of Jesus' followers, described in the earliest churches we read about in the book of Acts. Yes, these are now very charged, deeply loaded words. They have been tainted, seriously damaged in a variety of contemporary settings around the globe. We know the names of those suspect countries, long branded as enemies of freedom and liberty and our preferred way of life. We know the negative residual of these real and pretend powers, the hard way of life expressed in these oppressively strict and repressive countries. Frankly, a whole lot of baggage has been attached to these words. They terms that have been polluted beyond repair, prejudiced to the degree that we have trouble separating their purest definitions from the horrors and atrocities inflicted on citizens fairly and unfairly associated with these repressive regimes. That is the nature of these words. Let's be honest, we cannot hear the word communism without flinching and without attaching our stereotypical and prejudicial reactions to it. Socialism, on the other hand, seems a bit kinder and gentler, but for many it is like a gateway drug, allowing a crack in the door that will inevitably radically change a political system forever, and not for the better. It is on this playing field and with this backdrop that we explore divine side economics. Join me for the roller coaster ride, a homiletical and textual adventure sure to make you want to pull your hair out, all the while cheering Jesus' egalitarian predilections. Here we go. As with all parables, these metaphorically symbolic stories are easily understood and yet incredibly confounding. And yes, all at the same time. Jesus is describing the realm of God, painting a picture, a portrait of eternal magnitude and scope. The setting is a vineyard, a frequent image in the biblical narrative. Always an allegory in the Bible describing that mysteriously unknown place of God. And of course, there is a landowner who no doubt is the big guy, the man upstairs, invoking every other unfortunately preferred masculine and inappropriately gender-specific image long used to describe the holy, sexist in every way. The landowner is on a mission of God, from God, to use that great analogy from the Blues Brothers movie. The landowner is on a seek and find expedition, looking for anyone who is jobless and spending the day in idle uselessness. Whoever the landowner finds, they are immediately hired and sent into the vineyard to labor for its wonderful produce. Some are hired at 9 o'clock in the morning, some at noon, and others at 3 o'clock, and finally some right before the closing bell at the end of the day at cocktail hour. It's always 5 o'clock somewhere. They all gather to be paid. Those who came last put first in line. There's your sign, as Bill Engvall would say. These late arrivals surprisingly, shockingly receive a full day's pay. Wow. Bonus. Surely those who came that morning and worked in the heat of the day by the sweat of the brow are going to be rewarded accordingly. Oh, are they in for a big surprise? I can picture them salivating, barely able to contain themselves, and their rapidly building, giddy excitement. Hearts palpitating as they approach the manager who is doling out the dough. Surely it was going to be one of those mythical, magical, perhaps mysterious golden goose moments, like what we read today from Exodus, like manna from heaven and quails dropping down from the sky. Not. The world rarely works that way, except those rare occasions when it does. This was not one of those times. Much to their chagrin, they are paid a day's wages, the same as those who had barely lifted a finger and did not even have time to break a sweat. How can this be? Let the complaining, whining, and grumbling commence. It all makes for a most uncomfortable scene. Their question is fair. Do we suggest just? How dare you pay those who have not borne the brunt of the labor, the gravity of the task at hand, the same amount of money? How can you do that in good conscience? This is worse than paying an exorbitant minimum wage to the lowliest of workers. What does this say about my punctuality tomorrow when I am going to show up for work? What is my motivation? This stimulus package stinks. Bad precedent. Bad or worse parable. This is not the way the world works, nor should it be. For those of us who are steeped in capitalism and the Protestant work ethic, and never in communism, it is easy to dismiss this text, thinking it an aberration, that Jesus has either lost his mind or is out of his mind altogether. Surely we are not expected to embrace these ideas as indicative of the way we are to live our lives. Well, as is often the case with the biblical narrative, the answer is both yes and no. Let's get started. Yes, God expects us to expect equity in how we live our lives. Social justice that demands that everyone be treated fairly, to have an equal opportunity, to have the same basic standards of living, inalienable rights that are a reasonable expectation for all persons. Yes, God expects for us to advocate for said social justice, to fight for it as a means toward the end. That society, that all the earth is a level playing field that amazingly reflects the realm of God, imaged in the Gospels as the great banquet feast. A lush and lavish table spread for every human being, abundance overflowing in multiples. Of course, Jesus' concerns, so eloquently articulated in today's parable, transcend the pedestrian quid pro quo understandings of fiscal concerns, larger than a baseline of fiduciary concepts, greater than any financial expectation. And yes, we all know the importance of money. No one has to tell us that. But no, monetary concerns are not at the root of this text. No. This narrative is a far greater concern than material wealth and riches, but a reminder that we are all in this together, that we are one another's keepers, brothers and sisters all. Yes, a global village. We are responsible, accountable to each other in this ever-shrinking world in which we live. As we have poignantly, painfully learned, what happens on the other side of the world truly affects us. Sadly, that is why we are prone to go to war, preemptive and otherwise, trying desperately to keep certain elements at bay, far removed from the joy of our daily lives. It works until it does not. We have just observed the 19th anniversary of 9/11 and are soberly reminded that faraway realities can suddenly rear their ugly heads in up-close and personal ways. And need I remind any of us as we traverse these pandemically influenced days of COVID-19 novel coronavirus, that a seemingly innocent and innocuous event in China, dining on fillet of bat, can suddenly come home to roost in the worst ways imaginable. Now that was some bad takeout. We cannot ignore or avoid or dare dismiss the needs and concerns along with the behaviors of our neighbors north, south, east, or west. Today's parabolic lesson, another text conveniently placed into the time of Jesus by the early church, addressing their concerns, was the declaration that God's love was never intended to be selective, specifically targeted to one group as opposed to another. The gospel was quickly being disseminated to Gentile cultures in numerous Hellenistic lands. A faith intended for all persons everywhere, no matter their culture or context. It was a radical notion. Just imagine the expansion of the gospel to every nation, every color and creed, representing the Great Commission, a defining moment in delivering what was once considered a proprietary message, once solely reserved for the household of Israel, the chosen people of God, the select few. This interpretation of the ancient faith no longer suited Jesus. Quite simply, it was too limiting in scope, failing to meet his hospitable litmus test for the welcome and inclusion of every person from every culture, every clan and tribe, from all walks of life. Radical indeed. Jesus' understandings of his Jewish faith evolved as we read about his life in the Gospels, becoming far broader, far wider in knowledge and application. For many traditionalists, this was anathema, a dilution of the pure and proud faith. The audacity, the very idea of spreading this religious aberration, this mutation of the ancient faith to numerous people groups once considered unclean, certainly not kosher. To any and everybody, no matter their cultural or religious persuasion, individuals and groups never considered to be acceptable candidates for membership in what appears to have been a very exclusive club, sharing the ancient faith, no matter who they were or where they were on life's journey. Surely these persons were not to be confused or contained with the keepers of the covenant. We always have to have standards. How dare they be allowed entry as full-fledged, bona fide members? After all, there was a court of the Gentiles where they were allowed to be. How dare they be allowed entry as full-fledged, bona fide members? Who are they? Who are those people? This unholy other. Yes, the extravagant welcome, expansive inclusion, radical hospitality, and vulnerable openness of Jesus represented a radical alternative reality. A brand new day devoid of borders and inconveniently required personal and communal practices. For many, it was a gift, a gracious gift, while to others, a curse. To some, bane, and to others, blessing. And so life goes. The bottom line to this story is that in God's economy, we do not get what we deserve, but what we get is a gracious plenty. It is good news for everybody, even those who have to give up something, who have to share more than their perceived fair share. Yes, we are expected to live by a different standard, a welcoming and inclusive, hospitable people. We are to strive for a socially just world, egalitarian systems that reward everyone with a fair and just wage, allowing them the prosperity of the basics, the essentials that not only allow one to live, but go a long way toward making life worth living, certainly more enjoyable. Our goal is to empower everyone to become all that they can be in this life. The gospel imperative demands that we embrace a spirit of generosity towards all persons, a gratitude which is our thanksgiving, our ultimate thanksgiving to God, because all of us have been graced in some measure. Our worship is in vain when our brothers and sisters have need and go without, lacking what we consider the basic necessities. Yes, it is the kind of sermon we hear at Thanksgiving, our non-liturgical church year nationalistic celebration. But it is the kind of homiletical word that should be a part of every sermon we hear throughout the year. All our belief and faith must be wrapped in our grace extended toward neighbor, the other, the last whom Jesus made first, the least whom Jesus regarded as greatest. And we all know who constitutes our neighbor. The good news of the parable, the good news of the gospel, the good news of Jesus is that we never get what we deserve. We freely receive grace upon grace, all the goodness that comes with our created imagery as human beings, the very likeness of the divine sparked within us all. Thank God that we are the recipients of divine side economics. Always enough, always enough. In the name of the one who creates, redeems, and sustains, and freely gives unmerited grace to all humanity. Amen and amen.